I think most of us have the tools necessary to have as positive a relationship with other people as we can, be it in a leadership role, be it in a caregiving role, be it in a parenting role, a grandparenting role, or in a long-term marriage or other relationship. We have the tools we need. The problem is we don't always use the tools we have. I love the quote from Abraham Maslow. He said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, the whole world begins to look like a nail. Think about it, that's powerful. If the only tool you have is a hammer, the whole world begins to look like a nail. That's what this basic idea that I want to share with you today is about, is understanding some of the tools that we already have and realizing the importance of choice in all of our relationships. Another quote I love comes from a guy named Rollo May. He said, real human freedom is the ability to pause between the events of our lives and choose how we will respond. Real human freedom is the ability to pause between the events of our lives and choose how we will respond. So I briefly told you that I retired recently, and I had on my bucket list, and when you get old, bucket lists become more important. But one of my lists on my bucket list, one of the items on my bucket list, was I was going to write a book about this theory that I've been developing for quite a few years, as I'll tell you in a moment. And I wrote it primarily for my granddaughter, because I want her someday to read that. It's a legacy book, is what it really is. But what I found is, and it kind of came to me throughout the whole period, that this really works for all of us in all of our relationships. So let me give you a little history on the book real quick. I've been married to the same woman for 45 years. I say 50 years if you count the occasional wind chill. She doesn't like that line, can you imagine? We'll have to edit that out of the video if she's going to see it. Yeah, that's been an interesting experience for both of us. But a lot of things I want to talk to you about today have come out of that relationship. Very importantly to my story, and particularly to this group, is that my first daughter, Melissa Ann, was born in 1969, and unfortunately she had a brain aneurysm at 10 days old, and the doctor said she wouldn't live 10 days. She actually outlived both of those doctors and lived in our home with us for almost 30 years. She never developed beyond a 6-month-old child, but she was a marvelous person, a marvelous experience. And she taught me a lot about what we're going to talk about today, about the ability to see what is, not what could be. Things you guys deal with all the time. It's kind of neat to be able to talk to you about this. I also have a normal daughter, born in 1973, Jennifer. I'll talk more about her later. But she gave me a wonderful experience as well. But where the book really came about, because of Missy, and respite care was, and back in those days, there was hardly any respite care. There was some, but not what we see today. So it was very difficult to get somebody to come in and care for her. So I, at the time, was working for a reinsurance company here in Kansas City, a German-owned reinsurance company. And one of the neat things about Francona, was a company, is they had an unbelievable benefit package. I had like 6 weeks of paid leave a year, because that's the way they did it in Germany, and they thought they should do it here, and we didn't argue. we said, okay, yeah, we want to be treated the same. You know. European work style is totally different. But because of that, I had some extra time. That combination of that and Missy, finding respite care for Missy. And just out of the blue, Fred Pryor came to me and asked me to write a course for him on leadership skills for technical people. Now, wouldn't you be excited to sign up for that? Leadership skills for technical people. So, but I did, because I was a technical person and I thought that would be very interesting. So I helped write the program. Myself and another guy wrote it. And I started giving it occasionally. But the neat thing was, now again, this is 1979, 1980. No, it was 80s. It was in the 80s, I think. 89. It's 1989. Where do you think you got most of the knowledge or the information? If you had a question, in 1989, where would you go to get that? Where? Encyclopedia. And it wasn't an online encyclopedia, was it? Yeah. There was really no internet. There was no Wikipedia. There really wasn't much information. The only way you got information in those days was a book, go to a seminar, which is that whole business developed on, or the hot new technology in those days was audio cassette tapes. Remember those? The problem with those is they're very expensive. To my income level at that time, they were very expensive. But because I worked for Prior, I had access to all their books, their extensive library. I had access to all the audio tapes. I could buy them at a very reduced price. Plus, I could go to any of the day-long seminars they were running anywhere. And being kind of a junkie for that, this was great. But what that eventually developed into me is I'd written my course, and I knew what was in there, but as I watched other people do courses, I suddenly figured out that 80% of the stuff was the same thing. You know, they repackaged it, they called it something different, but it was really kind of the same ideas. And we'll talk later about what I call the 80-10-10 rule. Basically what that, I'll talk about it now. What that says is 80% of what I want to talk about today will apply 80% of the time to 80% of the people. We'll talk later, you have to be situational. Circumstances can change, but as a general rule, 80-10-10. The two tens, there's 10% of people in this world, in my opinion, who are going to succeed no matter what you do. You could be the worst leader in the world, and they're so self-driven that they're going to succeed. And there's the other 10%. They're down here somewhere, right? And I don't care what you do, who you do, how you do it, they're not going to be very influenced by your leadership, by your parenting, by your, in marriage situations. Some marriages just will not work because one of the partners don't really want it to work. So with all of that really coming together, one day I was, here, to show my age again, I was out walking with my Sony Walkman. I mean, this thing was so heavy, I'm surprised I don't have neck problems now. I mean, it was huge. And I'm listening to all these tapes, and I came up with what we're going to talk about today, this basic acronym. Okay, on the front side is the real summary of what we're going to talk about today. Very first quote there is the one I mentioned, Rollo May. Real human freedom is the ability to pause between the events of our lives, choose how we will respond. There are really three elements to the basic program that aren't on there. One is to recognize something, the second is to remember it, and the third is to apply it. But choice, realize in everything that happens to us, we have a choice. And what I've talked to Abby, my granddaughter, about all the time is good choices. Trying to help her learn to make good choices. She doesn't always do that. But you know what? I don't always do that either. One thing I want to make very, very clear, there's at least one person in this room who could tell you that I'm not perfect at anything I'm going to tell you today. I'm not saying that I'm the perfect parent, the perfect grandparent, close on a grandparent, but not parent, certainly not the perfect leader in my working career, and I've not been the perfect marriage partner. But what I do know is when I remember and apply the things we're going to talk about today, I'm a better partner, I'm a better parent, and I'm a better leader. And that's what it's about, is making the choice to be that better person. The middle of it kind of summarizes the basic theory, and then the last little graphic there is what happens when we react versus when we have a choice. Just by way of introduction, the two B's in basic, and I'm going to give you a handout on this. The two B's are understanding behavior and keeping your balance in your personal life and your professional life. The A stands for begin each situation anew. J. Paul Getty said, in times of rapid change, experience is your worst enemy. And it can be. I'm not discounting experience, but you always got to validate it. That's B-A. The S is be situational. I love Steven Spielberg's quote, every actor needs a different director at different times. Your job to be that director. Leaders in this company, every employee needs a different leader at different times. It's your job to be that leader. Parents, you know where I'm going with this, right? Every child needs a different parent at different times. Your job to be that parent. BAS, the I stands for watch the eye, and we're going to get into these in more detail in a minute. But basically what that, for me, is a real challenge, is to balance a positive, strong self-image with getting too far overboard and getting too egocentric on myself versus people I'm dealing with. So BASI, there are three C's. Big one is communication. Almost every relationship problem you'll come across has an element of a communication failure or a problem. Second C is care. I can't tell you how important care is in every relationship that we work on. And the last C is, really brings it all together, is common sense. You know, Charlie Jarvis said, people have a tremendous reservoir of common sense because they haven't used any of it yet. Can't you see that in some cases? That's